Okay, it's your boy Darren Dickinson in downtown Little Rock, like we said. We're asking a tough question. Reparations. What does that word mean when you hear it?
I don't know. That's my answer.
Okay.
No idea.
So reparations would be trying to repair the harm of slavery. Do you think it's due?
The harm of slavery?
Yes.
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
That's an honest answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
Got me. What's your name?
My name is Dion.
What?
Dion.
Yeah, and what do you do, sir?
I'm a pilot.
You're a pilot?
Yeah, I'm a
Really?
pilot. Yeah.
You guys are both pilots?
Yes, sir.
And you're from here in Little Rock?
No, we just flew here.
Oh, you just flew in? Are you for an airline or you're an independent pilot?
No, we're in flight school. We're almost done.
Oh, you're in flight school?
Yeah, we're...
Okay, so you like Top Gun?
No, not really.
So listen, my tough question is real easy, right? We're asking people, when you hear the word reparations, what comes to mind? You don't know? No, we think I know a lot. That's a fair question. Do you think there needs to be some education around the whole subject?
It depends on how you want it to pertain to your life, I would say.
So I just want to give you guys yourselves and say a little bit about why we're here. Miss Areva, you can go first.
My name is Areva Martin, and I'm an attorney in Los Angeles, and we are here to talk about the historic resolution of the action filed by residents of Palm Springs. Those residents are typically referred to as Section 14 and descendants, and we're here to just share about what happened to these residents in the 1960s and their fight for justice and the ultimate resolution of their claims.
Amazing. You go ahead and you can say who you are and just give a little bit of background about how you connected with Miss Areva.
Hi, my name is Pearl Devers. Thank you for having us. I am the president and co-founder of the Palm Springs Section 14 Survivors, who is a grassroots community organization. We fought long and hard to try to find someone to believe in us and represent this case. And so when we were able to connect with Ms. Martin, she was that person and has been able to help to across the nation regarding Palm Springs, which is Palm Springs' best kept secret until now.
Great. Okay, so let's jump in with you. Reparations is a big headline. It's huge. And so how did you come to be part of this case and connect with Ms. Pearl?
So in addition to being a civil rights attorney, I work a lot in the media, Stacey, and I was referred to Pearl Devers and the Section 14 group because I was told that they were looking not only for a civil rights attorney, but also looking for someone that could help elevate their story because they were having a really difficult time getting the local media in Palm Springs to cover their story and definitely had not been able to elevate the story outside of Palm Springs. So I was introduced to Pearl and other members of the Section 14 board of directors, and we just instantly clicked. I'm a student of Professor Charles Ogletree, the late Charles Ogletree, and he and Johnny Cochran, the late Johnny Cochran, were two of the pioneers in the reparations movement. They went into Tulsa, Oklahoma in the early 2000s and filed one of the first civil rights cases against the city of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and others who were involved in the massacre, the Greenwood Massacre. And I was a student of Professor Ogletree at Harvard Law School. So I've always been interested in the area. I've always been interested in the work that he did. So I saw this as an opportunity to, in some ways, continue the legacy of this professor who I revered a great deal. And even before Johnny Cochran died, I had an opportunity to work briefly with him. So for me, it was walking, in the shadows or standing on the shoulders of these legal giants. And that's what really drew me to this case.
Okay, so safe to say that the reparations is a passion of yours.
Absolutely. For me, the issue of reparations, restorative justice, these are the civil rights issues of this century for me, definitely of this era, of this decade. We talk a lot about efforts that we've seen across the country for folks to get justice for various things, whether it's voting rights or police brutality. There's so many ways in which our rights have been infringed upon. But restorative justice is one that really hits home for me again because of my work with Professor Ogletree and because of how widespread these issues are and how impactful they are to literally millions and millions of folks, particularly African American folks across the country.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so in regards to, I mean, we've had so many, the Tulsa Race Massacre, the Rosewood, we've had so many of these injustices upon our community. Why was the Palm Springs case so important for you?
Well, it's really important to note, Stacy, and thank you for pointing out Tulsa and Rosewood. Unfortunately, so many of these cases, they really exist, pretty much all of them exist outside of the current legal framework. We know that the Japanese who were interned in this country were able to secure reparations, and that was because of an act of Congress, law that was passed under Ronald Reagan when he was president of the United States. But there are not a lot of precedents to look to when we think about reparations or any kind of restitution being paid to African Americans because of racially targeted harms done to them. So for me, Palm Springs offered a unique opportunity. Palm Springs is a city that is known for being a very liberal city. It's in the very blue state of California. It has a very progressive city council, at least that's how they portray themselves. So I knew that if we were going to have success in any case like this, having a environment like Palm Springs would be the kind of place. Evanston, Illinois is another example. Evanston, a couple of years ago, was successful in passing a local reparations bill that resulted in some home assistance monies being paid to Black residents who have been impacted by redlining. And Evanston is in some ways very much like Palm Springs, not the glitz, not the glamour, not the Hollywood celebrities, but a very progressive city outside of a big city, Chicago, Illinois. So there are a lot of similarities between the politics of Palm Springs and Evanston. So they have been successful in Evanston. So I said, well, if they did it in Evanston, maybe we can do something very similar in Palm Springs, California.
Gotcha. And Pearl, I want to ask you, are you okay if I call you Miss Pearl, or do you want me to call you Pearl? Okay. I want to ask you, you remember this as a child, and I was doing a little bit of research on your experience. And can you tell me a little bit about how that affected your family moving forward, and what it did to your community as a whole? Can you just give me a little bit of background on that?
Sure. I was 12 years old when my family was evicted, or when we left our residence, a home which my father built. I wasn't really aware of the full circumstances because we were children, and my mother just picked my brother up and I up and said that we were moving. We left my father behind. Um, there was a lot I didn't know until later, until I became an adult. And my mother told me the story about how um, my father was just really, really distraught from after moving from the South, working really hard to establish, a home. He built our home as a carpenter um, with his own hands. And so after doing all of that and having to move, could not get a loan to move our home. He was not going down without a fight. He decided that, he was going to stay in the home. And so my mom left with my brothers and I. Little did I know that at that time my parents would never get back together again. It literally split, tore my family apart. My father became an alcoholic and died a brokenhearted man at the age of 68 years old.
Ooh, 68, that's young. Wow. Maybe in my naivety, I have a hard time understanding how the city was just able to bulldoze. Like how do they come in and just infiltrate a community and just take over, and you have no recourse? You just have to go. Like it floored me when I read it, and so I just need some background on that. I think that is wild to comprehend that there was no recourse for you guys. Like, how were they able to just do that?
Yeah, Stacey, it's really difficult for a lot of people when they hear this story. They first of all, they this only happened in the South, in the Jim Crow South. no one can imagine that California, again, this bastion of liberalism, had these kinds of acts happening. And definitely when you think about 1960s, because this is happening parallel to the civil rights movement, right? So our memories and our historical record of the 1960s is this moment of activism that's happening across the country. It's the era of Dr. Martin Luther King and all the civil rights giants, and it's the passage of civil rights legislation under, President Johnson. And so on one hand, we think of America as moving forward in this moment, but there were communities like Palm Springs all over this country, and there was redlining taking place. There were restrictive housing covenants like the ones that existed in Palm Springs that prevented Black folks from living in white neighborhoods. That was all happening in liberal California. And a lot of it was happening because, again, think about the power dynamics of African Americans in the 1960s. They weren't in positions of power. You didn't see them widely represented in, judicial positions. You didn't have a lot of Black even lawyers at that period, or Black folks graduating from law school. So there was this period of hierarchy in our society where if you were Black and particularly brown, you were on a lower hierarchical ring or rung, I should say, than white people. And, it's still in this period. And if you talk to older people, they can remember not being able to walk on the same side of the streets as white people, having to go to the back door when, going to a home of a white person. So even though that seems so far away, issue of racism, institutional racism, racial barriers, racial targeting was very much alive in this country, even as we were fighting for civil rights and even as we were making progress, we were still in many ways stuck in the Jim Crow era.
Yeah.
My father was one who was an outspoken. He was a spokesperson for the city. He actually was one of the charter members for the NAACP organization there locally. He did everything he could within his power. It fell on literally deaf ears. They just literally didn't have any power.
Yeah, it's still mind-boggling. But as you were saying, like my parents are in their early 70s and late 70s, and they remember desegregation. And my dad, he talks about, the marches. He would never march because he was like, I can't. He was like, somebody water hose me is going down. But they talk about those things, and it's my parents are just, they were there, it's not even that far removed when you really think about it. So it was reported that the city of Palm Springs is making a $20 million commitment. What does that entail for families that were affected? I assume it's not the mass, of the families that were affected. Is that correct? That will receive?
Frank, historic agreement is with the city. So the value of the settlement and the agreement is $27 million. It breaks down into different, one of the buckets is actually a cash payment of $5.91 million that will go to the Section 14 survivors organization. And that organization that Pearl is the founder of and the president of, they will make a determination with consultants and with experts and with a whole methodical and thorough and comprehensive vetting process, how monies will be distributed and to whom monies will be distributed to. Now, in addition to those monies, there is about $21 million set aside by the city to address the loss of generational wealth through home ownership, through home loan assistance programs, and through economic development programs. So that $21 million will be made available on a priority basis to the Section 14 survivors and descendants, and then also made available to other low-income people in Palm Springs. Unfortunately, like many cities in California right now, home ownership is very elusive to many individuals that live in California. The average cost of a home is upward of $900 to $1 million, depending on the neighborhood. So there are literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who are locked out of home ownership in the state, and particularly in a city like Palm Springs, which is a desert oasis, a vacation spot. So the homes tend to be very, very expensive. So this is historic on so many levels. One, because of the cash payment restitution. You look at cash payments that have been made to other communities, even Rosewood, Florida, which was an act of their state legislature in the 1990s to pay restitution. It was only $2.1 million. I shouldn't even say only, because that tends to diminish it. It was $2.1 million. So this is one of the largest awards that we are aware of in terms of cash. And the programmatic piece of it, the housing purchase, ability to purchase homes, the home loan assistance, and the economic development. We're really excited about that because, again, this is a community where when Palm Springs Section 14 was burned out and upended, the Black families went to the outer skirts of Palm Springs, which is what now is called the North End. Some are homeowners, but many are not. And then the Latino community went to a different part of Palm Springs. Again, some are homeowners, but many are not. And what I'm hoping can happen with the cash, everybody is really anxious about how much the individuals get, but Pearl and I are meeting with and talking to experts about the possibility of even investing some of that money and letting it grow and create even greater opportunities. So, getting money in the hands of people obviously is important, but also what can this money do? How can this money be leveraged in a way that creates even more money? Evanston, I'll go back to that example. Evanston, after the city set aside about $10 million to pay for these to pay for homeowners assistance for home repairs, a nonprofit, very similar to Pearl's nonprofit, was established, and now they've raised an additional $5 million in that nonprofit that's being distributed to African Americans in Evanston. So in many ways, this is just the beginning. It's the tip of the iceberg. The opportunities for philanthropy, for philanthropic dollars from clergy, from other nonprofit organizations, from high net worth individuals. So there is such an opportunity now for the Section 14 nonprofit organization to really leverage this agreement and this settlement and to make this money make more money.
Absolutely. Pearl, what do you think is going to happen moving forward? What are your hopes for this settlement, and what do you foresee happening in your community, and what would you like to see happen?
Well, first of all, I do salute the victory that we have now. We tried for decades to attract attention to the story. As I stated, the story was dead, and bringing this story alive, that's a win. So we're grateful for that. The fact that myself and others sacrificed so many years out of our time, some money and energy to fight on behalf of the survivors and the descendants. We were willing to do that. That's another win for us. So I'm right now celebrating the wins. We did receive an apology from the city after being ignored for 60 plus years. Although the apology was not enough at that time, that's why we continued to fight, but that was a win. The removal of a statue. There was a statue of the then mayor, Bogart, who oversaw the destruction of our homes because of our activism. So that was a win. To be able to reconnect with our friends and for decades ago is a huge win to be able to connect with our community. And also an opportunity to be able to tell our stories and to have someone to listen after so many years is a win. So this settlement also has solidified us as partners in the city of, as pioneers in the city of Palm Springs, and it's cemented our legacy there. The legacy for us is proof that we were there because there was prior to our fight and our activism. And so, like Areva said, we are just really looking forward to looking at all of the creative ideas that might be out there that we can put forth to help to benefit the lives of the survivors and the descendants, and therefore to make the city of Palm Springs overall better. So we're looking for healing. Many of our descendants and survivors have not had an opportunity to process the emotional trauma, that racial trauma that has been inflicted upon us. So we have a lot of work basically ahead of us to do, and we're pretty excited to be able to begin that work now without having to fight for justice from the city.
Yeah, that is
And I just want to highlight that, Stacey, what Pearl said. I think we can't underestimate or we can't underscore enough how this community was thought of. These were people who the city had written off as, they called them at one point,
Relocatees.
relocatees. Okay, thank you for that. Relocatees. They were villainized in the local press. They called their home, their community, a slum community. They called it a dilapidated, rundown community. So think about being the folks who are the most really in some ways hated, the folks that created a taint on, you were a stain on the pristine whiteness of this wealthy vacation enclave. You were an eyesore. You were something that we didn't want anyone else to see. We didn't want anyone to know about you. We had written you out of our entire history. And now the local paper that was complicit in many ways in, pushing that false narrative, when they ran the story after the November 14th vote, the unanimous vote by the city council to resolve this matter, and to see some of these individuals on the front page of that local paper, not as the folks that lived in the slums, not as the public nuisances, but to see them as folks that fought and now won and were victorious. I mean, that is really,
that's amazing.
I wasn't at the civil rights movement. I wasn't over, but I can imagine how they felt just by being recognized for what they did. And that's, I mean, when you do something, it kind of seems like it was easy, but it's really important to recognize how this community was thought of, erased from the history of Palm Springs. Palm Springs did not ever want to tell the story of Section 14. They wanted it to be a forgotten, buried story. They wanted to rewrite the history, tell the story of the indigenous people. And, we are staying in solidarity with indigenous people, but they did not want to tell the history of Black people and Latinos. And so now this group, and I have to give a lot of credit to Pearl and her seniors, because this was a senior-led movement. This was not college students. This was not millennials. This was not Gen Z. These were folks in their 70s and 80s, many in wheelchairs, on walkers with canes, who led this movement and faithfully showed up and pressed and used their voices. And now they are forever going to be recognized as the group that fought City Hall. Pastor Freddie Haynes, who came in to help us, he and I were texting about it, and he says they fought that rich white city and they won. And that was like, it sent chills through my body, because, again, when you're in the fight, you don't really look at it that way. But as an outsider, someone who came into Palm Springs, I mean, that's what he sees, this wealthy, white, predominantly white city, and Black and brown people who we know are often marginalized, forgotten about, counted out, discounted, to stand up. It's the ultimate David and Goliath story. So
I might add that when Areva was talking about the narrative that painted about our community, if you look in the media, normally they would put these dilapidated homes and these shacks and what have you. And there, back in the early 1920s and 30s, there was that. It was basically an Indian reservation. We grew up on an Indian reservation, and so, but when they talked about our community being a slum, they never mentioned the fact that they denied us of city privileges such as trash pickup and a lot of the things that we had to burn our trash. But nevertheless, they called my father helped build the hospital that I was born in, yet we had a home that he built, but yet they wanted to discount all of the contributions that was made. I know of a one family who lost a family member building digging a cesspool there to help create the infrastructure of that city. They built the golf courses and everything, and yet were just just thrown away. So.
Wow. Um, I mean, I commend you guys. That is amazing. Areva, before we close out, I want to know, it seems like the reparations fight is a fight that you're in and you're going to move forward with. Do you feel like, we've all been screaming about our 40 acres and a mule and we're going to get and all this stuff. Do you think that the Black people as a whole will ever see that 40 acres and a mule or any type of reparations, for, what was promised? Do you think that we'll see that? I feel like you are kind of spearheading that fight. So do you think that's something that we will ever see?
Well, let me tell you this, Stacey. Again, the timing of what happened in Palm Springs could not have been better. Because if you've been following the reparations movement, particularly in California, several years ago, a legislator by the name of Dr. Shirley Weber put forth a bill to create a reparations commission. The governor signed that bill. It was a 2-year study for this commission to go around the state, study the impact of reparations. California wasn't a slave state, but still the vestiges of slavery was very much alive in California, to study what happened to African Americans in the state of California, and then to make recommendations about laws that could be enacted to address the harms done to Black folks. There was a lot of excitement when this law was passed and signed by the governor, and the commission was going around the state. And this was all after the murder of George Floyd. So we're talking May of 2020. We are now in November, December of 2024. So the pendulum has swung. And we've seen this incredible backlash, and a lot of that energy and excitement about reparations has faded, has waned significantly. And a lot of those folks outside the Black community who were willing to stand up and stand in solidarity aren't there anymore. And evidence of that is coming out of the California State Legislature this legislative term, where several bills that addressed, again, the harms done to Blacks in California. And many of those bills failed. Some were vetoed by the governor. So in this moment, reparations is in a perilous state. We have seen the president-elect Donald Trump talk about penalizing colleges and universities that have used DEI to what he say benefit Black students, that he wants to pay reparations to white students who were, in his words, discriminated against because of these DEI policies. So we made significant gains around the country after George Floyd's murder. You saw Detroit, St. Louis, Sacramento, New Orleans, cities around the country create reparations committees and commissions like California. They were inspired by what California did. State legislatures, New York created its own reparations commission modeled after California. So there was all this activity and activism and hope that finally we were going to get somewhere. There's a study bill that's been stalled in Congress that would create a study by a congressional agency to study reparations. It's been stalled forever. Big push on Joe Biden to sign it as an executive order. That hasn't happened. We know he's down to his last couple of weeks. So let me tell you what I'm hopeful about. I'm hopeful about the folks like Pearl and the folks in Palm Springs and the folks that I've met in Evanston and St. Louis and other cities, because they are going to continue this fight. But I'm clear-eyed about the challenges we face now and about the mood of this country. I'm not certain that over the next 4 years under a Trump administration that we'll make any progress on restorative justice, but we'll use these 4 years to stay in the fight, to strategize, to meet, to collaborate, to plan, and we'll be ready because the pendulum will swing again, right? We'll be back to hopefully a democratically ran Congress and Senate and Democrats sitting in the White House. And I just say to all those justice warriors, just use this time to be ready, so we don't have to get ready when our opportunity comes again. Because I think if we spend this time wisely and strategically, when that pendulum swings again, we'll have more examples like Palm Springs. They'll be able to use Palm Springs as a motivator to keep doing this work in this moment. But this is a moment where we're going to be have to keep our heads down and our hope up, because we are going to be fighting some significant battles under the Trump administration.
Absolutely. Well, I thank you ladies so much for joining me on Elevated Daily. My name is Stacey Harris, guys. Thank you, Pearl. Thank you, Areva. And you guys keep up with the story. You can log in on, real quick, is there a link that they can find specifics about how to join or get involved?
Yes, you want to give the Section 14 website, Pearl? People can visit
the
there.
Section 14 Survivors, section14survivors.com.
Okay,
and you can go to my website, arevamartin.com. I also post, you can follow me on all things Instagram, Facebook, X. I'm constantly updating. We've had a ton, as Pearl said, of media coverage, local, national, international. We're working on a film project. We have a lot that we are hopeful about. We're still hopeful that we're going to build a racial and cultural healing center in Palm Springs in collaboration with the city, with some state partners and some government partners in DC and some philanthropic partners. So there's a lot that will continue to be lifted up as a result of this historic agreement.
Amazing. Thank you, ladies, so much. And I look forward to seeing the movement. And I'm going to check it out, too. I'm going to log in and check it out.
Hey, it's your boy Derek Dickinson for Little Rock IPTV. We're near downtown Little Rock, and we're asking the tough question. Reparations. When you hear the word, what do you think?
Oh, man. Honestly, I don't even know. I really don't.
Okay, now that's an honest answer.
Yeah.
And so, what do you think it would take? You know, how much do you think there needs to be an information campaign about reparations?
Yes, I guess. I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't.
All right, that's a fair answer. We're taking it.